2.0.0 Power Saws. Explain how to use a circular saw and identify different types of blades. Differentiate between jigsaws and reciprocating saws and explain how to use them. Explain how to use a portable bandsaw. Describe the difference between miter saws and cutoff saws. Explain how to use table saws and describe the types of jobs for which they are best suited. And then there are performance tasks. Safely and properly demonstrate the use of the following tools. So when you're with your instructor, you'll have to demonstrate the use of some of these tools. 2.1.0 Circular Saw. I don't know if this is true anymore, but the old timers, when I started in the trade, they would call a circular saw a skill saw. And to this day, I think some of them might still call it a skill saw. That's because Skill, S-K-I-L-L, was the first company to ever come up with a saw that had a circular blade. So they just called them skill saws. Now, many manufacturers make circular saws. Some people will still call them generically, they'll call them skill saws. Many years ago, a company named Skill, there you go, made a power tool history by introducing the portable circular saw. Today, many companies make dozens of models, but a lot of people still refer to portable circular saws as skill saws. Other names include utility saw, electric hand saw, and builder's saw. The portable circular saw is designed to cut lumber and boards to size, and they are available in corded and cordless models. So here's a skill saw or a circular saw, and the blade, here's an arrow on the lower guard. Shows you this blade is going to be turning in this direction. You have to be very careful. There's something called kickback. When you're pushing forward on the blade, if the blade gets stuck, it has a tendency to push this saw back towards you. And if you lay your hand across the board to hold it, this thing can kick back across your fingers and you can lose them. So do not do that. This is the upper guard. It does not move. This is the lower guard. It does. It's retractable. So as you cut into the material, this lower blade guard will retract. Don't ever remove the lower guard on a skill saw or a circular saw. It's there to protect you. If it's not snapping back, if the lower guard isn't snapping back, there's too much dust buildup in here. Take some compressed air and clean it out. Unplug the drill, the circular saw, and then clean it out. Get all of that sawdust out of there, and then this lower guard will snap back into place. Here's the guide slot. Here's the base plate. The size of circular saw is based on the diameter of the circular blade. Circular saws used in the United States typically use fractional inch measurements with blade diameters that range from 3 3/8 to 16 1/4 inches. Most popular blade size for corded saws is 7 1/4 inches. Many smaller cordless circular saws use 6 1/2 inch blades. A hole in the center of a circular saw blade fits onto the arbor or shaft of the saw. Circular saws are also available in metric sizes. Metric circular saws typically have circular blades of 165 millimeters, 190 millimeters, or 235 millimeters. Here's a highlight. It says the blade is protected by two guards. On the top, the upper blade guard protects workers from flying debris and from accidentally touching the spinning blade. The lower guard is spring-loaded. When the saw is pushed forward, it retracts up and under the top guard to allow the saw to cut. I want to make this also highlight, and I'm going to make it a different color. There, that's a different color. Here's another highlight. Never use a saw unless the lower blade guard is properly attached. The top guard protects the user from the blade and from flying particles. Says saw blades fall into two categories, standard steel and carbide tipped. Standard steel blades must be sharpened regularly, while carbide tipped blades remain sharp for a much longer period of time. So here are the different types of blades. Rip blade or rip saw These blades are designed to cut with the grain of the wood. Cross-cut, these blades are designed to cut across the grain of the wood. Combination, these blades are designed to cut hard or soft wood, either with the grain or across the grain. Nail cutters, this blade has large carbide tipped teeth that can make rough cuts through nails that may be embedded in the work. Non-ferrous metal cutter. This blade has carbide tipped teeth for cutting aluminum, copper, lead, and brass. It should be lubricated with oil or wax before each use. 2.1.1 Circular Saw Safety Guidelines Maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with saws, especially safety glasses. Always be aware of the blade's location and as it relates to your hands or any other part of your body. Before connecting the saw to its power source, ensure that the blade is tight and that the blade guard is working correctly. The chosen blade should have a maximum RPM equal to or higher than the speed of the saw. To avoid hitting water lines or electrical wiring, find out what's inside the wall or on the other side of the partition before cutting through a structure. During operation, keep both hands on the saw grips. Never force the saw through the work. This causes binding and overheating and may cause injury. Never reach underneath the work while operating the saw and never stand directly behind the work. Always stand to one side of the work. Use clamps to secure small pieces of material to be cut. Know where the saw's power cord is located at all times. Accidentally cutting through the power cord can cause electrocution. And then it says, the most important maintenance on a circular saw is at the lower blade guard. Sawdust builds up and causes the guard to get stuck. If the guard sticks and does not move quickly over the blade after it makes a cut, the bare blade may still be turning when the saw is set down and may cause damage. Remove sawdust from the blade guard area. Remember to always disconnect the power source before performing any maintenance. 2.1.2 Operating circular saws. Don the appropriate personal protective equipment. Secure and support the material you're cutting. If the work isn't heavy enough to stay in position without moving, it should be weighted or clamped down. Mark the cut using a pencil or marking tool. Unplug or remove the battery pack from the saw before adjusting the blade depth to the thickness of the wood being cut plus 1/4 inch. This prevents the blade from protruding through the material farther than necessary. Place the front edge of the base plate on the work so the guide notch and the blade are in line. After the saw has been started and is up to full speed, slowly move it forward to begin cutting. As the blade begins to cut, it will leave a kerf that measures roughly 1/8 of an inch wide. Remember, the kerf is the cut part. Oops. Stop that. It says the channel created by a saw blade passing through the material, which is equal to the width of the blade teeth. It's important to consider the width of the kerf when making cuts with a circular saw. Be sure to align the blade with the waist side of the cutting line, or the finished piece will be short. When marking for the cut, mark an X on the waist side of the cut mark as a reminder of which side of the mark to cut. The lower blade guard will automatically rotate up and under the top guard when the saw is pushed forward. While cutting with the saw, grip the saw handles firmly with 2 hands as shown in figure 23. Release the trigger switch once the piece is cut. The blade will stop rotating. Make sure the blade stops before setting the saw down. So here's someone using a circular saw to cut. The worm drive saw. Worm drive saw is a heavy-duty type of circular saw. Most circular saws have a direct drive. That is, the blade is mounted on a shaft that is part of the motor. With a worm drive saw, the motor drives the blade from the rear through 2 gears. One gear, the worm gear, is cylindrical and threaded like a screw. The worm gear drives a wheel-shaped gear, the worm wheel, that's directly attached to the shaft of to which the blade is fastened. 2.2.0 Jigsaw and Reciprocating Saws. The two types of saws capable of making straight and curved cuts are the jigsaw and the reciprocating saw. Both of these saws have a blade that moves back and forth to enable the cutting action, moving backward and forward on a straight line. 2.2.0 Jigsaws and Reciprocating Saws. The two types of saws capable of making straight and curved cuts are jigsaws and reciprocating saws. Reciprocating saws saw that moving backward and forward on a straight line. Both of these saws have a blade that moves back and forth to enable the cutting action. 2.2.1 Jigsaws. Jigsaws have very fine blades which make them effective tools for doing delicate and intricate work. They're commonly used for cutting out patterns on or irregular shapes from wood or even thin metal. Today's cordless jigsaw is an extremely useful portable power tool. It can make a straight cut or curved cuts in wood, metal, plastic, wallboard, and other materials. The jigsaw cuts with a blade that moves up and down, unlike the spinning blade of a circular saw. This means that each cutting stroke is followed by a return stroke, so that the saw is cutting only half the time it is operating. This is called upcutting or clean cutting. So here's a battery-operated jigsaw. It says an important part of the jigsaw is the base plate, the shoe plate or foot plate. Its broad surface helps to keep the blades lined up. It keeps the work from vibrating and allows the blade teeth to bite into the material. So here's the base plate, and it has to be securely up against the material that you're trying to cut, whether it be a wall or a board or what have you. The jigsaw has changeable blades that enable it to cut many different materials from wood and metal to wallboard and ceramic tile. Fine-toothed blades are often used for thin materials and smoother cuts. Coarse blades are used for faster cutting or thicker material, and when smooth cuts are not a concern. Blades are rated by the number of teeth per inch or teeth per centimeter. Caution, do not lift the blade out of the work while the saw is still running. If the blade is lifted out, the tip of the blade may hit the wood surface, marring the work and possibly breaking the blade. 2.2.2 Reciprocating Saws. A reciprocating saw, regardless of manufacturer, is often referred to as a sawzall, a trademark of the Milwaukee Electric Tool Corporation in the United States because it was the first saw designed to serve as an electric hacksaw. Both the jigsaw and the reciprocating saw can make straight and curved cuts. They're used to cut irregular shapes and holes in plaster, plasterboard, plywood, studs, metal, and most other materials that can be cut with a saw. Both saws have straight blades that move up and down along a straight line as they're guided along the cut. The reciprocating saw is designed for more heavy-duty jobs than the jigsaw. It also uses longer and tougher blades than the jigsaw. In fact, the reciprocating saw is used for jobs that require brute strength, which makes it an excellent choice for general demolition work. It can saw through walls or ceilings and create openings for windows, plumbing lines, and more. So here's a reciprocating saw. Like the book said, the Sawzall is a trademark of Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Tool Corporation. Jigsaw and reciprocating saw blades are available for a wide variety of cutting tasks and materials. To make selection easier, the blades are often labeled for the material or specific use. As a general rule, metal cutting blades have more teeth per inch or centimeter than wood cutting blades. The teeth are also smaller. Like the jigsaw, reciprocating saws come in single speed, 2-speed, and variable speed models. The low speed setting is best for metal work. The high speed setting is for sawing wood and other soft materials. 2.2.3 Jigsaw and reciprocating saw safety and maintenance.
As with any power tool, jigsaw and reciprocating saws can be dangerous to operate if safety guidelines are ignored. In addition to following basic power tool safety guidelines, familiarize yourself with the following safety rules before operating a jigsaw or reciprocating saw. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with saws, especially safety glasses. Before cutting through a wall or partition, find out what is inside the wall or on the other side of the partition. That's a highlight. This will prevent the accidental cutting of water lines or electrical wires. Make sure that the saw is disconnected from its power source before installing or changing blades or performing any maintenance on the saw. When installing a blade in the saw, make sure that its collar is as far as it will go before tightening the screw securely. When replacing a broken blade, look for any pieces of the blade that may be stuck inside the collar. Verify that the switch is in the off position before it is plugged into a power source. Always use a sharp blade, never force the blade through the work. Forcing or leaning into the blade can cause you to lose your balance and possibly even be cut by the saw. When cutting metal, use a metal cutting blade. Lubricate the blade with an agent such as beeswax to help make tight turns and to reduce the chance of breaking the blade. 2.2.4 Operating jigsaws and reciprocating saws. Don the appropriate personal protective equipment. Clamp the material being sawed to a pair of sawhorses or secure to a vise to reduce vibration. Disconnect the saw from its power source. Confirm that the blade you have chosen is suitable for the material you're cutting. Check the blade for dulling or damage. Measure the material and mark it before cutting. If a cut must be made from the middle of the board, drill a hole at the starting point that's large enough to allow the blade to pass through it. Reconnect the saw to its power source. Squeeze the trigger to start the saw blade and move the blade gently but firmly into the material. Continue feeding the saw into the work at a reasonable pace without forcing it. Never force the blade into the work. When the cut is finished, release the trigger and let the blade come to a stop before removing it from the work. Note if cutting from the edge of a board or panel with a jigsaw, ensure the front of the base plate is resting firmly on the surface of the work before starting the saw. The blade should not be touching the work at this stage. Another note, when a reciprocating saw blade first strikes the surface, it may jump back. Keep a steady hand on the cutting action, and the cutting action will eventually allow the blade to enter the workpiece. Forcefully plunging the blade into the surface is a common cause of broken blades. Before cutting material with a reciprocating saw, set the saw to the desired speed. Use lower speeds for sawing metal. Use higher speeds for sawing wood and other soft materials. Grip the saw with both hands and place the base plate firmly against the workpiece. Once the trigger is squeezed, the blade moves back and forth, cutting the material on the backstroke. I was going to say something, but all right. 2.3.0 Portable bandsaws. The bandsaw has a continuous blade that forms a loop. That's why they call it a band saw. The blade is a band, and the saw blade moves in one direction over and over and over. Portable bandsaw can cut pipe, metal, plastics, woods, and irregularly shaped materials. It's especially good for cutting heavy metal, but performs equally as well on fine cutting jobs. Although it can cut wood, it's used almost exclusively to cut metal products on the job site. So here's a bandsaw, and here's the blade that runs around two drums. It just keeps going around and around and around. This is the stop. The stop has to be firmly against the material that you're cutting. The blade is going to rotate in a direction that draws the material into the stop. So you want that stop firmly against the material when you're trying to cut. Here's a highlight. It says, like most blades, its coarseness is rated in teeth per centimeter or teeth per inch, TPI. As a general rule, higher TPIs produce smoother cuts. Here's one of the drums. at the blade. Here's the blade, there's the direction of the blade. It runs around these two drums and forces the material up against the stop. While some band saws have multiple speeds, most do not. Portable bandsaw generally cuts best at a low speed since higher speeds cause the blade's teeth to rub rather than cut. This can create heat through friction, which reduces the life of the blade. Then there's warning, a portable bandsaw always cuts in the direction of the user. For that reason, workers must be especially careful to avoid injury when using this type of saw. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment and stay focused on the work. Don't have loose fitting clothes. Don't let your shirt tails or untucked shirt get caught in the drum of the bandsaw. 2.3.1 Bandsaw Safety and Maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with saws, especially safety glasses. Keep your hands and fingers away from the path of the blade. Make sure the saw is disconnected from its power source before performing any maintenance or before adjusting the blade. Never use your thumbs to move wood or other material toward the blade. Use only a bandsaw that has a stop in place. Before cutting through lines or pipes, confirm that they do not contain hazardous or combustible materials. Never force a portable bandsaw. Let the saw do the cutting. Before backing out of a cut, turn off the machine, then back out the blade after it stops moving. 2.3.2 Operating a portable bandsaw. Step 1, don the appropriate PPE. Disconnect the portable bandsaw from its power source. Verify you're using the right blade for the job. Check the blade tension and adjust if necessary. Confirm that both blade guides are close to the blade. Reconnect the portable bandsaw to its power source. Place the stop firmly against the object to be cut. Plan saw cuts to avoid backing out of curves in the object being cut. Place marks on the wood to guide you while cutting. Remember to use pencils since ink will permanently stain most woods. Hold the material you intend to cut flat on the table before starting the cut. Turn on the bandsaw and allow the blade to come to full speed. Feed the material so that the blade follows the path of the marks. Little or no downward pressure is needed to make good cuts since the weight of the saw provides pressure for cutting. When finished cutting, turn off the bandsaw. And note the direction of the blade rotation can pull the saw toward the stop. If the stop is not firmly against the workpiece, the saw will jump when started until the stop slams against the material being cut. 2.4.0 Miter and Cutoff Saws. Miter saws and cutoff saws are similar in that both are used to make straight or miter cuts. Both types of saws can be mounted permanently, but portable and cordless versions of the saw have the convenience of allowing users to move them from a workshop to a work site. Power miter saw. Here's a highlight. It says the power miter saw combines a miter box with a circular saw, allowing it to make straight and mitered cuts. There are two types of power miter saws: power miter saws and compound miter saws. So a regular miter saw can swing from about 45 degrees in one direction to about 45 degrees in another direction. A compound miter not only can swing from that 45 to the other 45, but the blade itself can be tilted on its axis. So it can be tilted this way and also this way. That's why it's a compound miter. Abrasive cutoff saws. An abrasive cutoff saw, also referred to as a chop saw or a cutoff saw, can be used to make straight cuts or angular cuts through materials such as angle iron, flat bars, and channel. Like miter saws, cutoff saws can be either stationary or portable. Abrasive blade of a cutoff saw can be between 10 and 18 inches in diameter. Metric blades are commonly 250 millimeter to 350 millimeter in diameter. When the saw is in operation, the blade spins at such high speed that the resulting friction is hot enough to burn through the material. Like all rotating blades and stones, the maximum RPM of the blade must be equal to or greater than that of the saw. 2.4.3 Miter and Cutoff Saw Safety and Maintenance. Several basic safety guidelines should be followed when operating a miter saw or cutoff saw to ensure worker safety and equipment protection. If either saw is being used on materials that produce airborne dust, there are important silica exposure standards that must be followed. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with saws, especially safety glasses and a half mask respirator if you're cutting concrete. Never wear a watch or jewelry while operating the saw because they can get caught in the machinery. Securely lock the blade at the correct cutting angle. While operating the saw, keep your hands and fingers clear of the blade. Never attempt to adjust the saw while it's running. Confirm the blade is in good condition and secure before using the saw. Do not allow other workers to stand nearby while operating the saw. Make sure the work area is clear of flammable materials such as chemicals and rags that can ignite from sparks. Abrasive cutoff saws tend to produce streams of sparks. Disconnect the saw from its power source before changing the blade or performing any sort of maintenance. Verify that the RPM rating of the blade meets or exceeds the saw's spindle speed. Check all saw guards to ensure that they are in place and working properly. Never retract a safety guard to view material being cut while the saw is in use. If cutting long material, ensure that the other end of the material is supported. 2.4.4 Operating miter and cutoff saws. Don the appropriate personal protective equipment. Ensure the power supply is disconnected from the saw. Set the angle or tilt of the blade according to the cut that needs to be made. Reconnect the power supply to the saw. Place the material to be cut firmly against the fence. With the blade arm raised, turn the saw on and allow it to reach maximum speed. Firmly grasp the handle of the rotating saw arm and lower the blade onto the material. Some compound miter saws allow the rotating arm to slide while cutting. Once the cut has been made, turn off the saw and raise the rotating saw arm. Table saws. Table saws are typically used for ripping and cross-cutting lumber. This is highlighted. Ripping involves cutting lumber to a specific width, while cross-cutting involves cutting it to a specific length. So ripping is going with the grain, cross-cutting is going at a 90-degree angle to the grain. Since the table saw has an exposed blade and fence, users can feed lumber into the blade in a controlled manner. The result is a saw that is excellent for making precise and accurate cuts, which is one reason why the table saw are favorite of furniture and cabinet makers. Here's a table saw. This is a small portable table saw. Be very careful when you're using table saws. The guards need to be in place, and you need to keep your wits about you. Always use a push stick to push the material through the blade. Don't use your hand. Table saw safety and maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with saws, especially safety glasses. Use blades designed for the job. Confirm the blade is sharp prior to cutting. Verify that the blade guard moves freely before connecting the power. Use a push stick or board to push any material that may require your hand to pass near the blade. Do not use the table saw fence during a cross-cutting operation without placing a block between the material being cut and the fence. This prevents the cut-off piece from being trapped between the blade and the fence. Keep the table saw bench clear of all debris, especially when it is in use. Disconnect the table saw from its power source when you're adjusting the blade or performing any type of maintenance. Always anticipate kickback when ripping any type of material. This means you should not stand in line with the blade while it is cutting. Instead, stand to one side until the cutting is finished. Set the blade to the correct height. Make sure any lumber you are cutting is flat on the bench and the board is pressed level against the rip fence when cutting. Ripping wood with a table saw. Well, alright, I'm going to skip this. if you're studying carpentry, make sure you go over it. Section 2 review. The proper way to start cutting material with a circular saw is to what? It says power up the saw full speed, then slowly move it toward the material. I think that's right. Hold the lower blade guard up. No. Press the blade against the material. No. Tilt the front edge of the blade. Place blade. No, it's A. Power up the saw to full speed, then slowly move it toward into the material. A jigsaw is an effective tool for making doing delicate work on thin materials. The blade on a portable bandsaw spins in a circular motion. No. Runs in one direction around guides. C. It's a continuous loop. A type of miter saw in which the blade can be pivoted horizontally and vertically is called a compound miter saw. And pushing a board against the table saw's blade before it reaches full speed can cause kickback and serious injury. 3.0.0 grinders and oscillating multi-tools. I've got one of those oscillating multi-tools. I like it. You can cut, you can sand, you can grind. It's a really nice tool. Grinding tools can power all kinds of abrasive wheels, brushes, buffs, drums, bits, saws, and discs. These wheels come in a variety of materials and grit. Grit is the strength of it. The granular sand-like material used to make sandpaper and similar materials abrasive. Grit is graded according to its texture. The grit number indicates the number of abrasive granules in a standard size per inch or per centimeter. The higher the grit number, the more particles in a given area, indicating a finer abrasive material. Warning, always wear safety goggles and a face shield when working with grinders. Make sure that the work area is free of combustible materials such as rags or flammable liquids and that a fire extinguisher is easily accessible. Clothes should be snug and comfortable and free of cuffs at the wrists and ankles. Wearing excessively loose clothing on the work site can be extremely dangerous. 3.1.0 grinders. This is highlighted. Angle grinders are used to grind away hard, heavy materials and to grind surfaces such as pipes, plates, or welds. So here's an angle grinder. The wheel is 90 degrees to the shaft. It's perpendicular to the hand, or it's parallel to the handle. It's a side grinder. Here's a pencil grinder, an end grinder. End grinders are sometimes called horizontal grinders or pencil grinders. I'm going to highlight that. They're called pencil grinders. These smaller grinders are used to smooth the inside of materials such as pipe. The grinding disc on the end of the grinder rotates in line with the motor shaft. Grinding is also done with the outside of the grinding disc. Like end grinders, detail grinders, also known as die grinders, have an arbor that extends from the motor shaft onto which the small attachments called points can be mounted to smooth and polish intricate metallic work. So these are the points. There's a stone cone. It's made out of abrasive material, like the grit on sandpaper. Bench grinders are also great for renewing worn edges and maintaining the sharp edges of cutting tools, like your chisels. Here's a bench grinder with the guards in place, and the tool rest should be no more than 1/8 of an inch away from the disc. Heavy-duty grinder wheels range from 6 3/4 to 10 inches. Says there should be a distance of only 1/8 of an inch between the tool rest and the wheel. No more. Any bigger than that, there's a tendency for things that you're trying to grind, like if it's a bolt, it can turn and get stuck in that groove. 3.1.1 Grinder Safety and Maintenance. Number 1 is highlighted. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with grinders, especially gloves and safety glasses. Never wear loose-fitting clothing or jewelry that can get caught in a grinder's wheel. Always disconnect the power source before performing maintenance. Keep your hands away from the grinding wheel. To keep sparks from flying into the path of other workers or from igniting flammable materials, use standing screens when grinding near walkways, other workers, or storage areas. Let me go ahead. I'm not going to read all of this to you. For bench grinders, always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with bench grinders, especially gloves and safety glasses. And then always adjust the tool rest so they are within 1/8 of an inch of the wheel. Warning, never grind soft material or wood on a grinding wheel. The material will wedge itself between the grit, creating stresses that may cause the wheel to shatter. 3.1.2 Operating grinders. For angle end and detail grinders, don the appropriate personal protective equipment, especially a face shield. Secure the material in a vise or clamp. Clamp it to a workbench. To use an angle grinder, place one hand on the handle of the grinder and one on the trigger. To use an end grinder or detail grinder, grip the grinder handle at the shaft end with one hand and cradle the opposite motor end of the tool in your other hand. Always allow the grinder to reach its maximum speed before grinding. Turn off the grinder and be sure that the wheel has stopped rotating before putting it down. Complete the work by removing any loose material with a wire brush. For bench grinders, don the appropriate personal protective equipment, especially a face shield. Always use the adjustable tool rest as a support when grinding or beveling metal pieces. There should be a maximum gap of 1/8 of an inch between the tool rest and the wheel, and a 1/4 inch between the wheel guard, also called the spark arrestor, and the wheel. Confirm that the bench grinder is firmly secured to a stable surface. Always allow the grinder to reach its maximum speed before grinding. Keep the metal cool as it is being ground. If the metal gets too hot, it can destroy the temper of the material. You might want to have some water on hand that you can just dip it in every couple of seconds just to keep it cool, or oil. Always work on the surface of the wheel, not the side. Figure 37 shows the proper way to use a bench grinder. There you go. So you use the face of the wheel, not the side of the wheel. Grinding tungsten can be a hazardous to your grinder. Workers who use power tools are almost certain to encounter objects that contain tungsten. As mentioned earlier, tungsten is an extremely hard and brittle metal with a very high melting point. Attempting to grind tungsten carbide tools with conventional grinding discs and wheels is a bad idea. Rather than actually sharpening the tool, the most likely outcome of such an attempt is a damaged and or weakened grinding wheel. 3.2.0 Grinder attachments and accessories. Accessories such as guards and shields can be added to a portable grinder to provide additional protection when special grinding discs are used. For example, there are specialized guards for use with diamond discs, flap discs, and cup brushes. So here's one of those attachments that you can use. Flaring cup guard. This is highlighted. It says adapters and backing pads can be installed on a grinder's arbor so that different types of sanding discs, wheels, and buffing pads can be used. There's a backing pad and adapter nut. There's almost an endless variety of grinder attachments available, and most of them are available in various sizes. Some of the most common accessories are shown in Figure 40. They include wire brushes, cup brushes, stones, flap discs, cutting wheels, and polishing and buffing wheels. Some grinders can also be equipped with a cutoff wheel. These are best described as smaller, thinner versions of the blade used on an abrasive saw. Because of their tendency to break or fly apart when too much stress is applied, many companies require workers to have specific permission and documentation before they can be used. Special bits can be used on some grinders to remove rough edges and burrs from the inside and outside of pipes and other objects. These rotary bits are commonly called burr bits. They're commonly called burr bits. I'm going to highlight that. Here are some examples of burr bits. 3.3.0 Oscillating Multi-Tools. Oscillating multi-tools operate by moving these attachments back and forth at a speed of up to 21,000 oscillations per minute. So here's an example of one. This extension will vibrate, it'll oscillate back and forth. You can cut up carpet or take up tile. You can cut metal with it. One of the most useful characteristics of a multi-tool is its ability to fit into tight, confined spaces. As a result, they are an excellent choice for undercutting low baseboards, cutting small openings in drywall, or cutting pipe where there's little room for larger tools. Like most other basic power tools, oscillating multi-tools are available in corded versions, but cordless models make up the bulk of those found on today's job sites. 3.3.1 Oscillating Multi-Tool Safety and Maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when working with oscillating multi-tools, especially gloves and safety glasses. Disconnect the oscillating multi-tool from its power source when changing the attachment or performing maintenance. Confirm that the attachment on the tool is designed for the job being performed. Use clamps or vices to securely hold the work in place. Never wear loose clothing or jewelry that can get caught in the oscillating multi-tools attachments. Keep your hands away from the attachment when oscillating multi-tool is turned on. The Section 3 review. A stationary grinder that has two wheels for grinding, removing dust, rust, and buffing material is a bench grinder. Special rotary bits that can be used on grinders to remove rough edges from the inside and outside of pipes and other objects are commonly called burr bits. One characteristic that makes an oscillating multi-tool so useful is its ability to fit into tight spaces. Miscellaneous power tools. A power nailer. Power nailers, often referred to as nail guns, are common on construction sites. They greatly speed up the installation of materials such as wallboard, molding, framing members, and shingles. Here, this one's pneumatic. It has a place for an air hose. Pneumatic nailer. Pneumatic nailers are driven by compressed air traveling through air lines connected to an air compressor. They're designed for specific purposes such as roofing, framing, siding, flooring, sheathing, trim, and finishing. Nailers use specific types of nails depending on the material to be fastened. Nails come in coils and in strips and are loaded into the nail gun. Warning: never exceed the maximum specified operating pressure of a pneumatic nailer. Doing so will damage the pneumatic nailer and may cause injury. Power screwdrivers. Power screwdrivers use a power source, this model uses a battery, to speed production in a variety of applications such as drywall installation, floor sheathing, and underlayment, decking, fencing, and cement board installation. A chain of screws feeds automatically into the firing chamber. Most models incorporate a back-out feature to drive out screws, as well as a guide that keeps the screws feed aligned and tangle-free. Power screwdrivers can accept Phillips or square slot screws that weigh an average of 6 pounds. Powder actuated tools. Powder actuated fasteners are used to drive steel pins or threaded steel studs directly into masonry and steel. You have to be certified. An advantage of these tools is that they eliminate the need for compressed air to operate the tool. However, these tools can be extremely dangerous. They look and fire like a gun and use the force of gunpowder load, typically .22 or .27 caliber, to drive the fasteners into the material. The depth to which the pin or stud driven is controlled by the density of the base material and the power level or the strength of the powder load. So the caliber is how big they are. Like I say, it's between 22 and 27 caliber. They have different ratings, green, yellow, red. They've got other colors. They've got brown. Brown is less than green. Green, yellow, red. Red is very powerful. And then they have some that are more powerful than red. Operators of powder actuated tools must be trained and certified by the manufacturer of the tool being used. So you can't just pick it up and use it. Don't do that on a job site. Using cordless nailers also allows craft workers to avoid the training and certification required to use powder actuated tools. So they're using cordless nailers. 4.1.1 Power Nailer Safety and Maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment, especially safety glasses. Read and understand the manufacturer's manual. When using a pneumatic nailer, pay close attention to where you are pointing the nail gun. Never point the nail gun toward another worker or toward any part of your body. I'm going to make that a highlight. There. Never point it toward another worker or toward your body. Be sure you select the correct nail gun fastener for the job and never load the tool until you're ready to use it. Never try to operate a powder actuating tool without the proper training. Keep pneumatic nailers oiled according to the manufacturer's instructions. Disconnect the power source from the nailer before attempting to load or repair it. Always treat nailers as if they are loaded and ready to fire. Check for pipes, electrical wiring, vents, and other materials behind wallboard before nailing. Be careful about nailing into paneling or any other thin surface. The fastener may go through it and strike another worker. Never leave a pneumatic nailer connected to a compressor hose or power when it's not in use. When loading the driver, install the drive pin before loading the charge. Never place your hands behind the material being fastened. Do not fire the tool close to the edge of the material, especially concrete. Pieces of concrete may chip off and strike someone. 4.1.2 Operating Power Nailers. Don the appropriate personal protective equipment. If using a pneumatic nailer, disconnect it from the air hose. Inspect the nailer for damage and loose connections. Load the fastener into the nailer. When loading a powder actuated tool, feed the pin or stud into the piston, followed by the gunpowder cartridge. If you're using a pneumatic nailer, connect it to the air hose. Also check the air hose compressor and adjust the pressure to the recommended level. Most nailers operate at pressure of 70 to 120 pounds per square inch. No more than that. Test the nailing ability of the tool using a piece of scrap material. If the nail penetration is not deep enough, follow the manufacturer's instructions for increasing the power of the nailer. Hold the pneumatic or battery-powered nailer firmly against the material to be fastened, then press the trigger. If you're using a powder-actuated nailer, position the tool in front of the item to be fastened and press firmly against the mounting surface. After finishing the job, disconnect the power source from the nailer. Turn off the air supply and disconnect the air hose from the nailer. Remove the battery from the cordless nailer. Remove the power charge from a powder actuated fastening tool. This is an example of a powder actuated tool. Warning: a nail gun is not a toy. Playing with a nail gun can cause serious injury or death. Nails can easily pierce a hand, leg, or eye. Never point a nail gun at anyone and use it only as directed by the manufacturer. 4.2.0 Hydraulic Jacks. It says there are various types of hydraulic jacks, including those with internal pumps and those that are lever-operated pump. The latter type is often referred to as a porta-power, the name of one common brand. Here's a portable jack. We use a power. Here's a power pony that they were talking about. We will use one similar to this in order to cut holes in panels. And they have cups that are different sizes, and you match up the cup with the blade, and then as you pump the handle, the teeth or the blade will go through the side of the panel, and it'll pop out a nice, smooth, round hole. So electricians use this kind of a porta power, I think they call it. Okay. 4.2.1 hydraulic and safety maintenance. Always wear the appropriate personal protective equipment, especially safety glasses. Operate the jack according to the manufacturer's guidelines. Check the area prior to jacking a load to ensure that other workers are safely out of the way and that the load will clear all obstacles. Make sure you have the appropriate jack for the job and never exceed its lifting capability. Check the fluid level in the jack before using it and watch any fluid leaks during use. If a porta power is being used, make sure that the hydraulic hose is not twisted or kinked. Like I say, we use one to cut holes in panels. Do not move the pump if the hose is under pressure. Make sure the base of the jack can be placed on a solid, even, and level surface. Never place the base of a jack on bare soil or any other surface that can compact or shift under the load. If there's a possibility that the load could move while jacking, make sure it is chalked and restrained. Never jack metal against metal. Use wood softener as a buffer between metal surfaces. Place the jack under the load so that the load is centered and the weight is uniformly distributed. Stay clear of the object being lifted to avoid injury if the load slips off the jack. Do not use an extension bar or cheater, or step on the pump handle to gain more leverage. Never leave a jack under a load as a support. Block the load up as you progress through the lift so that it will only fall a short distance if the jack fails. Once at the proper height, add blocking as needed so the load is supported while the jack is removed. To reduce tripping hazards, remove the jack's lever anytime the jack is not being pumped. Section 4 review. Pneumatic nailers are designed to safely fire when the trigger is squeezed and the tool has to be pressed against the material being fastened. It's a safety mechanism. You can't just pull the trigger and have it go off. It has to be pressed against the material. When using a portable hydraulic jack, be sure to place the base of the jack on a solid level surface. Okay. Well, this concludes 00104 Power Tools. If you got anything out of the video, please leave me a like and consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.
Hey, this is Brian Young. If you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'll see you on the next video.